and welcome everyone to the SCP podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the upcoming fall webinar series that will kick off on September 26th with Transforming Communities, an Introduction to Future Search. So many situations call for stakeholder input when planning or launching a new enterprise or community initiative, and getting all stakeholders' perspectives is essential in a turbulent environment. But how to harness people to change their own systems? So to talk about this, I am here today with Jeff Axelbank, who is the speaker and presenter of the upcoming SCP session, Transforming Communities, an Introduction to Future Search. Jeff is an organizational psychologist and management consultant specializing in the functioning of teams and groups. Jeff consults with organizations on issues such as strategic planning, preventing burnout, building teams, managing transitions, improving communications, resolving conflict, and on family business issues. Jeff is an expert on future search and integrates its principles into all his work since his future search training 14 years ago. He's currently leading a research project also interviewing 20 schools superintendents who have used future search in their districts in the past 8 years. And this would be an upcoming article for publication for Jeff. So future search was developed based on social psychology and group relations theories and has been extensively studied for over 50 years. It has been applied to a wide variety of sectors such as corporations, governments, school districts, higher education, environmental issues, healthcare, human services, and religious congregations. So welcome, Jeff. It's very exciting to have you here and talking more about future search and learning more about your work, and also giving us a preview of what we're going to have in this exciting new fall series with your opening with your topic here, future search. So welcome.
I'm really thrilled to be here and really excited about the upcoming webinar.
Great. So let's talk more about it. SCP, as you know, has a mix of members ranging from graduate students to seasoned professionals. Who is this course appropriate for?
You know, in a way, it could be appropriate for everybody because if you're a student, you obviously want to learn about as much as you can as you go into your career and to open, your mind to different options. And if you're a seasoned person, there may be some things you hadn't thought about, believe it or not. It's possible. And I think that a lot of people really don't know how to engage a whole system. A lot of SCP people, maybe do coaching or assessment of individuals, and they may work with a team or leadership development. But I don't think too many people actually work from a whole system perspective. So I think this is really a good opportunity.
Yes, definitely. And so, Jeff, how did you become involved with future search? And what inspired, your interest in this approach and to actually apply it in your practice?
Well, I think I was first exposed to it in some specialized training I did back around the late 90s and 2000. And it really grabbed me because, again, not many people talk about how to work with a whole system. And what I've seen in my life, not only professionally but personally, is what happens when an organization or a community or a government tries to do something and they don't include all the stakeholders, and inevitably there's resistance and problems and obstacles thrown in the way. And so this seemed like a really promising method to deal with that problem, or actually really avoid that problem entirely. And so future search is, in a sense, three different things. It's a kind of a meeting format. It's also a facilitation style, And so that's something that I integrate into all my work. And then the third thing, it is Marv Weisbord and Sandra Janoff, who develop Future Search, say it's also a way to change the world one meeting at a time. And so I'm interested in changing the world as well. So that's really why I love and I'm passionate about Future Search.
Yeah, the change component in this approach is very important, and bringing all stakeholders so critical for change. So, can you share an example of a successful Future Search project or initiative that you've been involved in? I mean, we mentioned before one that you are currently working on for a research project, but any other examples that you can share with us?
Sure. One that comes to mind that was really transformative was I facilitated a Future Search here in New Jersey in a town called Irvington, which is a very low income, kind of depressed town. And the origin of that project was that there was the National Institute of Early Education Research, NEAR, had gotten a grant to improve early education in 4 or 5, I can't remember, towns in Essex County in New Jersey, and they made outreach to the different towns, and they were able to get some programs going. But for some reason, they couldn't get a response from people in Irvington. And so they decided to do a Future Search around early childhood education and childcare in Irvington. And they pulled together stakeholders, including certainly the school district and the government, but also things that you might not think would be stakeholders to that kind of project, but clergy and local business people and youth and parents, and trying to think who else there was. I think, there were also some charitable foundations. One of the hallmarks of Future Search is you want to include potential funding sources. So when you create a plan and then you need to fund it, if the funding sources have been there and part of the creation of the plan, it's much easier to get the funding. So that was also one of the stakeholder groups that was involved with that. And it was really a kind of an incredible experience. And this is, I think, typical for Future Search. You get people together who don't normally talk to one another. And so this group of people, in a very structured process, were able to address a number of the issues that were really affecting early childhood education in Irvington. And one of the results that came out of it was they created a new organization called Irvington Cares, which was basically created by all the stakeholders that were part of this Future Search process, and to address for the long term the issues that were impeding quality early childhood education and childcare in their town. So it wasn't just, we're going to do this one thing one time, but something came out of it that was long lasting.
Right. So innovation seems to be a sort of a component that plays out in this type of dynamics and can be a result, right? Even if serendipitous, right? But innovation can be big.
Yeah, I think one of the things that often happens is you get some unexpected, unpredictable results. You mentioned that I'm involved with this research project interviewing superintendents, and one of the questions we're asking is, what happened, what came out that was unexpected, and some of the examples were pretty striking. I think the one that really grabbed me was one of the stakeholder groups that's typically involved is young people, and of course, when you're talking about a school system, they would have the high school and even middle school students as part of it, as one of the stakeholder groups. And in one of the Future Searches, one of the outcomes was that the students asked for less screen time. they actually wanted more paper and pencil. They were sort of tired of sitting in front of the computer all the time. And that was pretty unexpected. They didn't expect that, to happen. And there were, other examples, and certainly for these school districts, a lot of times a community may not be so eager to raise their taxes to support the schools. Often in order to do that, they have to have a referendum to issue a bond or something to build a new school or whatever the need is. And there were a number of superintendents that said that before the future search, they were having a hell of a time trying to get referenda passed. One of them said, this town hadn't passed a referendum for 60 years. And after the future search, we passed 3. Because they got the community together. People talked about what the need was. People had a greater understanding of what was going on, and they realized that everyone agreed. They had a common interest in the schools being funded properly, and so they were able then to pass referenda. And so I think that it is a kind of hallmark of future search that unexpected results happen that can be surprising. And if a leader goes into a future search with a particular agenda, that's probably not a good idea, because the community has ideas of their own, and so a leader has to go in with a sort of open mind and sort of open heart also, to be willing to hear what the community or what the organization. I mean, we're talking about communities, but really it also works in corporations as well. And there's some examples. I haven't personally been involved in these, but I know that IKEA, the big furniture company, used future search to redesign their product development cycle from raw material to retail. And they did that through a future search. And Whole Foods, the supermarket chain, had a long history of doing a future search every 5 years. I don't know what they're doing now that Amazon owns them, but before that, that was how they planned, and they would include all the stakeholders. And of course, they are phenomenally successful. So it seems like a good combination.
Yeah, a good approach, right? Particularly when you're working in a fast changing environment, right? In the environment we're living in today, or we started kind of getting into a more faster paced in the last few years. Having this process, right, is so important, to be able to do this fast, right? To bring everybody to the table that needs to be there.
And I think the other thing that's happening lately is the world is more and more polarized. And I think future search is kind of an antidote for that. I'll be talking more about this in the webinar, but the traditional planning, you want to call it planning 1.0, is to have a small group of people, the leaders, sit together in a room, and maybe they do a SWOT analysis, and they come up with a plan. But then they have to go sell the plan to the system, to the stakeholders, and then maybe planning 2.0 developed, where they said, okay, we have to ask the stakeholders. And so I think of a sort of hub and spoke idea, that you still have a small committee that's doing the planning, and they will then talk with all of the stakeholders around the wheel. But each of the stakeholder groups, even if you do focus groups or meetings with each of the groups, they're only seeing their piece of the system. They're only seeing their silo, and inevitably the group in the center, the hub that's trying to integrate it, they will leave something out. And when the plan comes up, these stakeholder groups will feel like, you didn't include what we said, and then that actually exacerbates polarization, that people feel like you didn't include me or my my interests. And Future Search gets people talking to one another so that they are doing the planning, and it's not just a central committee, talking to each group individually, but the groups are talking to one another, which um, which is an innovation itself, and yields, as I said, unexpected results.
Yeah, so important, particularly nowadays, where, like what you just said, that we're not so open to listening to everyone all the time. Sometimes because, again, time pressure. Sometimes because it's not in this way of making decisions. But how important it is, how much research points out to the fact that if we are exposed to the opinions and the ideas of others more frequently, how much open we are and how much more we can create or produce, right? And how much more can come out from that. And I know you're going to talk more about how this is now related to DEI and how we can apply this to the DEI perspective in terms of current topics or current applications of Future Search. Do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. Um, I'm aware that the literature is pretty clear that DEI initiatives that are like a one-off, like a one-time thing, or sending people to DEI training really does not work. And in fact, sometimes it can actually be counterproductive because people will feel forced and have a backlash. And I think how Future Search helps with DEI is in a way, kind of a stealth way of getting at DEI. That once you say we're going to do a DEI initiative, even if it's a long-standing, long-term one, people generally may feel resistant just because they're going to feel like something is shoved down their throats, um, as opposed to Future Search, which is getting people together to work on a shared problem and to find common ground and getting people to be exposed to one another in the service of doing something that everyone cares about. And so in a way, in like a stealth way, it's getting at DEI without calling it a DEI initiative, which in the end can be more effective to get people to understand one another and to hear one another, listen to one another. It sort of breaks down resistance and barriers. And if I've written an article that included some quotes from some literature about what a successful DEI program needs to have. And if you look at those criteria, they're embedded in Future Search just because it's Future Search and getting the whole system in the room and getting people talking to one another who don't normally talk to one another, and also including people in planning, including managers in the planning of what the work they're going to have to do, goes a long way towards enhancing and advancing DEI in organizations. So
Yeah, it sounds so interesting. So last question, Jeff. What do you hope participants gain as a result of taking this program or participating in this session with us?
yeah, so I guess what I would hope is that it would sort of open people's eyes to something that they may have felt like it's just impossible. Like, I just can't change this system, or people are often afraid because of the polarization and the heated conversations that happen. They're afraid to bring people together into the same room, and I hope that it gets people to see that there actually is a way. If you create the proper conditions, then people will actually be able to do the work. And the proper conditions are, based on the Future Search principles, but also the Future Search facilitation style as well. creates the proper conditions. And so I hope people will sort of have their eyes open, as well as just the future search principles can be applied to all your work. So I think it would, sort of open people's eyes and maybe, entice them to get trained themselves in future search. The other thing that I want to add is that something that's happened in the past, since the pandemic, is the idea of doing work virtually. So historically, Future Search has been an in-person event, an in-person process, which can be very expensive, because if you have a national organization or even international, you have to fly people in and house them, and lodging and accommodations and everything, and that's hugely expensive. And during the pandemic, the Future Search Network devised a customized online platform called Future Search in virtual space. And so it is now possible to do Future Search totally virtually. And I know one of the first examples of that was the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, did a Future Search, I think it was last March, that involved people from 30 different countries around the world. And they did it all virtually online. And so I'll be giving a brief tour of that online platform so that people will see, how viable that can be.
That sounds fantastic, amazing. So, in essence, participating in this program will help you gain the knowledge to identify the principles that you're mentioning, right? Identify the conditions for success of a future search conference, and the parts of the conference, how a conference is structured, and also what are the essence of identifying the stakeholders, right, that need to be part of a conference, of a future search conference. So coming to this program will give you an overview of everything that you need to know about future search, and also will give consulting psychologists a new way to think about whole system change and intervention, right, which you just mentioned before, that is so useful when working with organizations, particularly large, complex organizations with multiple stakeholders and communities. And also, it's important to have this knowledge and be able to provide it to coaching clients, right, with innovative ways to engage stakeholders in their organizations as a tool that they can use. Also, I know we'll also be providing information on how to become a Future Search conference facilitator for those that then want to take this a step forward, right, and continue their training with the Future Search network. So that's exciting also.
Yep. I'm really looking forward to it.
And I hope you all can join us to this 90-minute session, virtual session at SCP. It's going to be on Tuesday, September 26th at 3 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Central, and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can sign up on the SCP website, societyofconsultingpsychology.org. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff, and we look forward to the session.
Yep, I can't wait to see you all there.
Thanks.